Good evening, members and members of the public. My name is Councillor Harvey Cohen, and I'd like to welcome members of the public, colleagues and officers to tonight's meeting. I'm chairing tonight's meeting, and to manage the business as efficiently as possible, I will invite people to speak one at a time to ensure their contributions are properly heard. Therefore, please do not speak unless invited to do so by me, and thank you in advance for your assistance. The fire evacuation procedure: on hearing the fire alarm, please leave the building immediately using the nearest available exits, and there's quite a few displayed around us. Do not, under any circumstances, use the lift. The assembly point is in the area in the Civic office car park next to the roundabout, and you should not attempt to re-enter the building until it is known to be safe to do so. Let's start the meeting. Agenda at item 1, membership. There are no changes. Agenda item 2, communications and apologies. Apologies for absence have been received by councillors Ponder and Rani. The head of finance and business service, Matthew Bunyan, is also unfortunately unable to join us as he is unwell, and we wish him all the best for a speedy recovery. This meeting tonight includes items 5 and 6, which is the joint scrutiny of the draft budget. For that reason, we are joined by our colleagues from the Operations Review Committee, and thank you for coming, and we welcome you to our joint meeting tonight. During items 5 and 6, you will be entitled to ask questions and contribute to the discussion the same way as we are on Policy Review Committee. There are some pieces of Policy Review Committee business in tonight's agenda and after those items, and you're welcome to stay if you want to, but if not, we fully understand if you want to leave, and that goes for the rest of those joining us. I'd like to welcome Councillor Chris Shenton, Cabinet Member for Finance and Budget, for items 5, 6 and 7. And I'd also like to welcome several of your Cabinet colleagues who are here tonight. Welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to welcome Civic, the Chief Executive, who's here for items 5 and 6. And you're welcome to stay afterwards as well. Right, let's go on to agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest to declare? There are no interest to declare tonight. Agenda item 4, the minutes are the minutes of our meeting on the 5th of December. That's Policy Review Committee. 5th of December 2024, approved as a correct record. Members? Yes, they are. That's approved. So now we go to the substantial items. Page 13 of our papers tonight. Agenda item 5, consultation on setting the revenue budget for 2025-26, to be presented by Councillor Chris Shenton, as I said, Cabinet Member for Finance and Budget, and assisted by Sajida Bijale, the Chief Executive.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cohen. Yes, unfortunately, Matt Bunyan, the Head of Finance, is unwell, and I spoke to him on the phone. He's definitely unwell. So I'm very glad to say a former Head of Finance and current Chief Executive has, Sajida has agreed to step in and help present the piece. So we're starting off with the draft budget consultation, and I'll ask Sajida to present to you, please.
Thank you, Councillor Shenton. Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. First of all, how do you want to take this, Councillor Cohen? Do you want me to stop every so often and take questions, or wait at the end of presentation? How would you prefer?
So the presentation, if I saw it, it's a few pages long, isn't it?
It's 53 pages.
That's
I have no
right.
intention going through all 53 pages.
Members, is it okay if we take questions at the end, so then we can then flow, and then we'll have our questions, and it will help us with our questions as well. So we'll go through the presentation, and then we'll take a list of questions at the end.
Okay, thank you. So, right, first slide. I'm not going to go through that timeline, but you can see we started the budget process back in February 2024. That's when the medium-term financial forecast was approved by Council, and following on that, in June, July, we started the budget process in full earnest. And when you go on the next page, you can see the 5 years, that is 23-24, when we started the budget in financial year, when we started the work, our forecast was based on the assumptions available to us at that time. At the end of 27-28 financial year, the cumulative funding shortfall was going to be 670,000. That is on basis of the current financial year 24-25 is fully balanced. So moving on from there, right, this is, you get the first snapshot of the next year's budget or budgetary overview, and you can see our gross budget requirement of 33.5 for current financial year is going to increase to 36.15 mil, which is increase of 2.6 million. And I'm just going to read some big numbers. That 2.6 million comes from nearly £700,000 increase in business rates for council-owned properties. Out of that 700,000, 400,000 relates to platinum stages alone, which is under the council's control. 530,000 for pay increase estimated, £250,000 for external contracts for software, hardware, ground maintenance, etc. 120,000 towards insurance. So these are big numbers. Then you see on the same page how this is going to be funded. And the one big number jumps at us is new homes bonus. In current financial year, we used £468,000 to balance current year's budget. Going forward, we are only utilizing 13,000, and you will see the spreadsheet in presentation. The next year's budgetary allocation is 13,000 from new homes bonus because that's what the grants we are going to receive. So at the moment, the budgetary gap is 622,000. Sorry.
No, I was going to say that's the key number.
Yeah. So by law or by statute, we have to balance the budget, and Councillor Shenton or myself, we will give, if we can give you those answers, because when we reach to February's full council, you will have the balanced budget. Right, so it is important to take this in context. Chancellor's autumn statement 2024 gave us the key announcements or key information pieces that core spending power will increase by 3.2%. That wasn't the case. EPR, you must have heard that short form, extended producer's responsibility. Basically, this is about the recycling initiative and the responsibility being placed on the retailers. And here I can say that government has already allocated all the councils the funding through EPR. This council's allocation is £1.1 million. And the important thing is, even though there is an expectation it should be spent towards the waste management, but it is not ring-fenced for waste management because government knew the funding shortfall for all the councils, that there won't be sufficient funding to balance the budget, and hence EPR is not ring-fenced. So funding reforms, so basically we have been told that the multi-year settlement will come in from next financial year, which is quite important. It helps to forecast the future requirements and future budget that gives some certainty to local government. UK Shared Prosperity Fund, that was another fund which was allocated to councils. We were expecting that will stop, but fortunately it hasn't, but it has reduced significantly. Homelessness. Homelessness has been big issue for all district councils as well as unitaries and London boroughs. And we use our general fund or council tax funding to fund the homelessness. This year we have received additional funding to prevent homelessness, and that is £434,000. Disabilities facilities grant is also increased, and business rate 40% relief has been offered for hospitality and leisure industry. So, council tax. There has been no change in council tax increase regulation. Referendum limit has been confirmed at 2.99% or 3% or £5, whichever is the greater. But if any one of you have picked up in Trade Press, MJ, Local Government Chronicle, number of authorities or districts have written to the Secretary of State asking for if that referendum limit can be increased. Settlement funding, assessment. So September's CPI, a consumer price index, 1.7% has been applied for business rate and revenue support grant. I must give the disclaimer at this point. This budget does not include the increase in national insurance. The cost of increase in national insurance is circa 400K. That's because of two factors. As we know, the national insurance has gone up for employers from 13.8% to 15%, and the threshold has reduced from 9,100 to 5,000 pounds. And that has created additional cost burden of 400,000. However, the government has announced that the public bodies will be fully funded, and that will remain to be seen, because we won't find out until early February, the final settlement. New homes bonus, as mentioned early on, we are going to get 13,000, and in this pack there is all last few years, new homes bonus grant has been explained. There has been new concept has been introduced, something called funding, rather than funding guarantee, funding floor. And that has reduced from 4% to 0%, so nobody gets reduction, but many district council or most district councils haven't received any increase either. And there has been no more services grant as distributed in the past. Yeah. This is just for information, what the future economic outlook is. If anybody's interested, I will leave to it without boring anyone. Important numbers. CPI, as at end of December, was 2.5%, while RPI was 3.5%. That gives us some indication where the inflation is heading. Another important information is the base rate, because that impacts our interest, investment income, we use to balance our books. And that may likely to reduce, and that will be good news for mortgage payers, but for the council it's not, if you are not in borrowing position. Right, so where are we? We are hoping that we will get circa £2.1 million interest income from our investment. We are anticipating our average balances throughout the year will be somewhere 41.4 million. An estimated return will be somewhere 5.06%, yielding estimated investment income of 2.1 million. There may be the potential need for borrowing, but we are at the moment looking at the capital budgetary requirement very, very carefully and how we can generate the capital receipts rather than going into borrowings. And for the budget, we have used at the moment £1.5 million or applied £1.5 million from investment income. So there is a still headroom of £600,000. Right, so what are the main budgetary assumptions? We have proposed, or we assume the pay award for this budget, 3%, which is 532,000. Of course, that will be subject to the council's approval in February's full council meeting. However, this information comes from a number of different sources, our Hertfordshire authorities, as well as what's happening in local government bodies, and thus, most authorities are budgeting minimum 2.5% to 3%. Contractual inflation at the moment is somewhere based on RPI of 3.5% and CPI 2.5%. It will fluctuate in that range. Business rate, we are expecting business rate growth of 60K, 1.7%, revenue support grant, increase of 19,000 from the current financial year, which is not significant at all. Domestic abuse, safer accommodation, 39,000, and funding floor increase of 80,000. New homes bonus, the housing growth is based on 113 properties. However, the increase in empty homes properties of 17 and 45 new affordable homes. I will leave that without going into those numbers. I will leave that for you. It is in your pack. Business NNDR growth income. As you know, all Hertfordshire, not all, but districts like Hertsmere, they are in the business rate pooling, where there is, year on year increase in the business rate income. So Hertfordshire has formed the business rate pool, and we usually expect the growth income from business rate. However, the baseline is going to be reset from 26-27. So how that is going to impact on 25-26, before anybody asks me, I haven't got the answer. So council tax increase is based on, and you will, in forthcoming council, that is tomorrow, we have got the council tax base report, and you can see from there, the tax base growth is only 0.35%. The total year-on-year increase in number of properties is 113. However, the way the council tax base works in terms of Band D and the council tax benefit, I won't make it complicated. You can discuss it tomorrow. But long and short is, this is not going to give us much of the council tax increase. The increase is going to be 294,000, and that is going to significantly come from increase based on the assumption that council tax will go up on 2.99%. Now, this is very, very interesting slide. And you can see, you may ask me why you have taken 2010 and 11, why not before and why not after. In 2010-11, the funding structure, government grant funding structure changed, and that is more or less base point. And when you look at the net budgetary requirement, that is the council's budgetary requirement in 2010-11 was 14.5 million. And in 25-26, we are requesting 13.8, that is almost 14 million. So despite 15 years, the 15 years inflation, I'm not going to even sit here and calculate for anyone. I'm sure Google can do it for all of us. So in real term, the council's net budgetary requirement has reduced or gone down. That is mainly because efficiency as well as increase in our income. But the most important thing is, in 2010-11, 14.5 million were only funded by 6 million council tax levies, which is 40.3%, while 25-26, out of 14 million, 9 million is funded by council tax requirements. So gearing has gone from 40.3% to almost 66%. So bigger chunk has been picked up by the council tax levies. Right, this is just the snapshot, and so where does the 2.6 million increase comes from? 1.3 from the staffing, premises related 500,000, and so on and so forth. Again, just the interesting graphs. As you can see, 56% of all expenditure is on the staffing. Being service industry, there is no surprise in that. Income, as far as income is concerned, our gross income is 22.3 million, and 42% is from rental income, mainly property services, while 35% from fees and charges. And this is, again, interesting graph. You can see how year on year the income has increased. In 2010-11, it was barely 10 million, and now we have exceeded 20 million, that is somewhere 22 millions. Shall we move on?
Yeah.
I think we are on the pie graph. I think I was step ahead.
Do you want to look at
Yeah, I already spoke through that. Shall we move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, okay. Oh, right, again, another pie graph, and that gives us departmental breakdown of income, and you can see that 42% of total income comes from asset management, which is 9.5 million, while 25% comes from street scene, which is parking, garden waste, and other services. So this is another interesting slide. It basically explains how the net budgetary requirement of 13.8 is made up of. And those numbers I have already picked up, so I have no intention to go through it. Yeah, again, this is about the other side, so which is how the budget is going to be funded, which is pluses and minuses. And you can see the big minus is new homes bonus. So our reliance on new homes bonus, we are reducing it. This is just the quick, I think what I will do, if I can move on from there, and the next slide will give us the same information, but more meaningful. So shall we move on to the next slide, which is, yeah. So when you look at service by service, planning and economic development is showing from current year to next year, £65,000 increase, while housing services shows decrease of 46,000. Partnership and community engagement shows increase of 94,000. I'm going to pick up only the big numbers. Street scene shows increase of 105,000, while asset management shows increase in budget for 40,000, and finance and business services 43. So what other increases are there? 532,000 as mentioned on second slide, pay award 3%, pension lump sum increase of 68,000, and insurance renewal 116,000. And investment income has increased from 1.1 million to 1.5 million. And that has been reflected in revised medium-term financial plan, and I will draw your attention to the bottom line, which is year-on-year increase or decrease on net budgetary requirement, and that is a self-explanatory again. So when you take that on the next step, which is where do we stand in terms of the budgetary shortfall, assuming if we balance, or not if, we will balance 25-26 budget, then there is going to be still 224,000 budgetary gap in 26-27, 27-28, 447, and the cumulative 672,000 in 27-28. I think, well, being finance professionals, we can't complete any presentations without risks and uncertainties. National insurance, there may be potential funding shortfall if the full national insurance increase is not reimbursed by the government. That risk stands. Cost of living and economy, what that means is contracts, supplies and services, reliance on council tax benefit support, that all impacts the budget. Also, it impacts our pay bill, and recruitment and retention. Waste recycling and EPR. Recycling is going to be, we have been given, we will be given steep targets, and we will have to deliver those. Else Reform Studios, coming financial year is going to be difficult because of, I don't want to go in details in public meeting, but year after that is, we will have a better year from Else Reform Studios. Homelessness, as we all know, the cost of the private rents is increasing, and that is putting a lot of pressure on homelessness budget. However, I'm pleased to say our housing team is doing an incredible job, and if you recall, last full council we have taken homelessness reduction and housing strategy reports, and that gave very, very interesting stats, how wonderfully we are doing compared to many other councils. Right, I think I'm going to stop here and take questions.
Thank you very much. That was a very detailed report. Can I just start, and this is to Councillor Shenton, if you don't mind. As you are aware, the Council has a duty to produce an up-to-date financial strategy. And that is how we're able to scrutinise this budget. We have to link it to that. We don't scrutinise it line by line, income and expenditure, but by looking at the Council's administration, the Labour Liberal Democrats coalition, their plans and their strategy, and seeing how this budget aligns to them. That is what the idea of tonight is. The Council, as you know, is required to produce an up-to-date financial strategy as the key financial document we're meant to use tonight to show how this budget aligns with the corporate strategy and the corporate plans of the administration. The CFGS, the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny, make it absolutely clear that an up-to-date financial strategy is essential to allow good scrutiny of the budget. And this up-to-date financial strategy is essential to ensure and give us and residents and councillors scrutinising the budget confidence that all our resources are actually allocated to meet the needs and priorities of the leadership of this council. So can I please ask you, Councillor Shenton, as the Member for Finance and Budget, when was the last financial strategy prepared? And are you confident this budget fully aligns with the requirements of the corporate plan?
I believe it was 2010. No, I think it's expired in 2022, and it hasn't been refreshed because of all the ongoing troubles with. Oh, sorry, apologies. Yeah, it was. I believe it expired in 2022. We do the medium-term financial plan every year, which does reflect the planned expenditure over the next 3 years, the current year and the following 3 years. It is the intention to refresh and bring a completely up-to-date financial forecast in the summer. But yes, it is currently 2 years out of date.
Yeah, so it's fully out of date with the coalition, with the coalition's plans and corporate plan. It's based on the previous administration's corporate plan. So how do we align it, and how do we manage to scrutinise the budget according to your corporate plan and your corporate strategy then? I'd like the cabinet member to answer it, please.
Well, as I say, the medium-term financial plan is kept up to date. It's part of this presentation, and our plans align to that and to the. We know this. Last year we had a £468,000 expected deficit, which has been addressed as part of this budget process. There have other pressures have come on since, of course, but that's the mechanism is the star chamber between all the heads of services that go through taking that medium-term financial plan and making sure that our current expenditure is aligned to that and to breaking even, to be balanced.
So in the Star Chamber, can I ask this question? Because the corporate plan and the objectives of Councillor Newmark and your team are different to the previous administration, how is it shown that this is aligned to the new corporate plan? And why is the budget not linked to that, so we show that you're using more income or more revenue needed to produce against the new corporate plans and the corporate strategy?
Well, I believe that is the medium-term financial plan, which is up to date and is kept in these documents. We saw that last year for this year was 468,000 in deficit. That has all been brought back through the Star Chamber, through the discussions between heads of service. The additional costs this year are of this year. They were unexpected and new financial challenges that have to be adapted to. But yes, we are aware that, as I say, largely because of the change of work during the COVID epidemic, that the financial strategy wasn't kept up to date, and it is planned to in the summer.
Members, questions? I'll say it in the Councillor Giorgio. Yeah.
Thank you. So we've seen that we're expecting council tax growth of 0.35%. Do we think that's the realistic number? Is that being quite conservative? Taking into account the government's plans to build new homes, are we likely to receive more than £294,000 increase in council tax as a result of those new homes in the next year?
There's a long lead time on homes. The last 2 years, we have seen no growth, next to no growth, in our base number of houses. So even if we get grant planning permission, which is as much as we can do, they don't get built. They don't get built straight away. It will take time to come through. Eventually, more homes will mean more council tax, but that will take some time.
Do you know when we would expect to start seeing those come through as a supplementary, if that's okay?
For council tax-based calculation, it is prescribed by statute. So if you look at your tomorrow's agenda, which I have brought it with me, setting the council tax base, these are the actual numbers, and we have to take the actual increase in number of housing units as at mid-September in the previous financial year. So this additional numbers comes from the increase in number of housing units built as at mid-September 2024 for 25-26 budget. So 24-25, the total number of properties on the valuation list were 45,860. They gone up at the mid-September 2024, 45,747. That is 113 in properties increase. But some are 4 bedrooms, some 1 bedroom, so they get counted into something called Band D, which is average 3-bedroom terrace property. And then also there is a formula which had to be, again, it is in that report, and the number comes to very small fraction, 0.35% increase. So it's actual.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. And just to manage members' expectations and for clarity, a policy review members' questions will come first, and then operations review, and then we will open it up to other councillors. So I've got Councillor Allen next, and then Councillor Lambert. Oh, sorry, Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Sussman, and then Councillor Lambert.
Nice new buttons. Nix, what's the worst case scenario, and what's the plan B?
We have been told by the government in the autumn statement by the Chancellor that local authorities will be fully funded for national insurance, employers' national insurance increases, which is roughly £400,000. The initial information suggests that we will get a quarter of that, thereabouts, a quarter to 40%, so be £250,000 short. We have by law to balance the budget, and if we cannot raise revenue for reasonable revenue, they also have to be audited, so they can't be just reckless claims, they have to be reasonable claims. Then you have to start cutting services. But we will know what the final settlement for national insurance, employers' national insurance, is going to be by mid-February, and we will be able to accommodate that into the budget at that stage.
If I can just add to that, what's the option B? We have got EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility, 1.1 million funding. We have got additional housing grant, 430,000, as well as 600,000 headroom in investment income. So I won't suggest for the service cuts.
That's understood. Thank you very much. Councillor Sullivan and Sussman.
Thank you, Chair. So I've got a two-part question. The first one is just a bit of clarity to make sure that I fully understand. So in Appendix C, can you please let me know why the employee-related expenditure, including pension, and the net inflationary impact is much higher on 25-26 and then drops significantly for 26-27 onwards in Appendix C?
It's page 57 of the reports.
Yeah, that one. So the question is, why are so on 26-27, under the employee and related expenditure line, it's much higher than the forecast for the next years, and the column below, is there a reason why that's such an increase for this forecast year?
It's an £800,000. It's an £800,000 difference on the end.
Perfect. So then going on to the next part of my question. So we're setting a budget for 3% pay award for all staff, but we know that we have pay review strategies that are going on at the moment from ELGA, where we may need to re-review our benchmarking across departments. And do we have enough contingency to be able to raise pay in line with those recommendations if needed?
Sorry, I just got, I think, a technical thing.
No, it's just earlier we didn't have the mic, and for the use of the webcast, so if we can just make sure the mics are being used, thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, thank you.
I can't hear things back here. I don't know whether the microphones are properly working.
You feel the same?
I'm sorry.
I was going to ask exactly the same thing. I think also it's just adjusting to these new mic systems as well.
We've got a new
I think
system.
they need us to be a bit closer.
Yeah, I'll make a point of pointing at the microphone better.
I think, yeah, if you don't mind, Councillor Jensen.
Yeah, sure.
They are new microphones and maybe they have to adjust.
Fully accept.
In fact, just to let you know, this is the first meeting with the new microphones, so there is some adjustment necessary, thank you. So we just speak into the microphone, that will help. Councillor Sullivan's extra question, did we hear it? Or do you want to? No, we didn't, so can you just repeat?
Okay, so the question was, we've budgeted for a 3% staff pay rise for this year, but we know that we're doing some re-benchmarking across the board for different service areas where we may need to, maybe mid-year, pay review staff again based on that data. Do we have contingency to be able to do that within this budget?
Right. Yes, absolutely right. We have some recruitment, we definitely have recruitment difficulties in certain areas, such as planning and asset management. So we focused mainly on them at this stage, and we have got from ILGA, East of England Local Government Association, their findings. Based on that, we have increased the planning budget, and you can see that even the bottom line on planning shows only 64,000 increase. However, that is made up of mainly a lot more than that in the staffing expenditure, but also additional income has offset it to a certain extent. Similarly, asset management also includes the actual what ILGA's advice is. So it's based on where the real need and shortage of the staff or the staffing recruitment and retention issues are. Thank you.
So just following on from that, from you, yourself, Sajid Bijali, as Chief Executive, do you feel 3% is enough to help with our recruitment issues, which we do have?
I sincerely think because, yes, the pay is the main. If you look at our expenditure, 53% expenditure is staffing expenditure. I always put myself in the taxpayer's shoes. Most of our taxpayers are going to get, council taxpayers are going to get more than 3% increase pay increase, because ultimately their council tax is funding significant expenditure. So we have to cut our cloth accordingly. And to be fair, we have carried out, early staff consultation. Myself, Peter Garrity, and our acting head of HR, we met with our staff representatives. We explained them the budgetary situation, and they have been extremely cooperative. However, we are waiting at the moment. The staff consultation on pay is open, and that is going to be completed soon, literally early part of next week. But I'm hopeful, because in our staff session, staff briefing session, myself, Matthew, we were very open, we were transparent, explaining the budgetary pressures. So I hope that our staff will be understanding.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sussman, and then Councillor Giorgio.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it was obvious to hear about the concerns forthcoming, I think, and the sort of worries that we all have about homelessness. And I think looking at the pressures that everyone has, trying to run a business with the business rates, with, NI employees often, I just think there is a lack of rental housing, and I think we are going to see a lot more pressure. There's the homeless grant, was that 400 and something thousand? And did I hear that that money would be used sort of more generally and not just used for homelessness? Do we think that's the right time to be taking that approach?
I very much hear what you're saying and sympathise greatly. This council, for many years preceding me, has had a very effective homelessness prevention section. We have, even against comparable authorities, we have relatively low levels of homelessness, which is something to be greatly proud of. And I say it precedes me, it's not just what's happened in the last 2 years. But that does mean that when the government came along with, £1.1 million, spread, all other authorities got something similar as well, or something equivalent. That was directed, I suspect, to those authorities that weren't doing what they should be doing, were not pulling their weight. We will certainly be using the majority of that. I think it was 400,000 of that was being effectively redirected to the budget. But we will still be spending considerably more than the government have allocated for homelessness prevention.
Councillor Giorgio.
Thank you. Hertsmere is on a trajectory of generating more income from local community assets as a percentage of our total income. In your opinion, does relying on our own community asset income instead of central government funding or around the 25% that we receive from council tax enable us to give more certainty to our residents that their services will continue to be well funded? Thank you.
I mean, it's been a strategic goal of the council, again, for a long time. I think Councillor Cohen will testify to that. The intention has been to reduce our dependency on the government because, frankly, whichever colour it is, we don't really trust it. And we are doing so. As you pointed out with those figures, we're now getting just short of 2/3 of our funding coming from ourselves and not from central government. And, compared with a lot of authorities we see around the country, a lot of counties and unitaries with adult social care and things like that, we are in a relatively benign situation. So yes, it will always be our intention to try to ensure ourselves against the vagaries of central government, of whichever party.
Yeah, and we do that quite well, and we have done that quite well. But it's important going forward, as the graphs and the graphics show. Yeah, that's right. We have to reduce our reliance on government, and that's the future. Can I just welcome Councillor Collins to our meeting? Thank you very much. And Councillor Lambert's next.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to go back to, and I think it's, I'm full of admiration for trying to get all the numbers sitting together. I'm very impressed, as always, which I suppose might be Matthew Bunyan. Yeah, I am impressed. On page 19 of our agenda pack, at item 3.3, we acknowledge there's a funding gap at the moment of £622,000. And then on page 40 of the agenda pack, at item 11, there is this sort of shopping list of where we may be able to make up the £622,000. And it's all very well saying, oh, well, the final budget will be presented to the full council on the 26th of February, but it would be nice to have something before then so you can digest it. Do you have any steer for us about which of those bits on the shopping list you will be putting in to make up the deficit? Because I am assuming you've got to make up the deficit. Thank you.
You are absolutely correct in that assumption. We do have to make up the deficit. There is a genuine attempt to ask the whole council what they think. This 622,000 deficit, my suggestion, option one on the list, is to use some of the money from the homelessness prevention and some of the money from extended producer responsibilities. If we go look at the downside of that, we have a homelessness problem. Ours, as I said to Councillor Sutton, is less bad than most, than almost any probably, because our homelessness section or our housing section has done such a good job over such a long time. But there is constant pressure. We build some houses through Hertsmere Development Limited, but you know it's a small number really, and we do need money to fund the service. We believe because we already provide so much funding that we can use some of that money in this year to balance the budget. We also believe that the extended producer, sorry, I always keep on getting the extended producer responsibility. So you're probably aware of what this is. Companies who produce waste can pay councils to clear it up. Now, I have a strong expectation that just as when makers of soft drinks were told you can't put sugar in drinks, and they said, oh, it's impossible not to, as soon as they were taxed, they found ways of not doing so. And suppliers will reduce their packaging. But then that's a good thing. That's what we want them to do. It does mean that we will get less money for tidying it up. So that is a very short-term funding arrangement as well. We would hope in the medium term to be getting a better revenue stream from the studios. We know that stages 7, 8, 9, we hope that we might be able to get them back into use and generating income. This is a especially challenging year because, in large part, because of the studios and settling that debt. But yes, in 12 months' time, we're going to be coming back saying similar things about how stressed it is and finding other ways to reduce costs or increase income. But yeah, I think the option one, which is the preferred one, is what I would recommend. But I am very, very interested in everybody's views on that, on everybody's opinions. Thank you.
Yeah, I was actually expecting a slide on that because I think that's pretty vital for us and a group like that. Okay, because I think that, I mean, we're going to take the rest of the questions as well, but I think you've brought up, Councillor Lambert, a really key points that we should be discussing as well, because there are other options, as it says quite clearly in 11.3, increasing fees and charges, and especially certain fees which people pay to the council. Have we looked into that? Have we looked how we compare to surrounding councils? And as other members have mentioned, taking out money from the homeless prevention grant and also our recycling doesn't send out a great message. I don't think it sends out the message at all that we should be, and also we don't know how these grants are going to go forward, so I think we need to be a bit more looking forward and looking outside the box of ways we can do it, or using the terminology slightly different. But we'll go on to further questions, and then maybe we can then have a chat about that. So I think I've got Councillor Kaza and then Councillor Quilty.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation, Councillor Shenton. 2 questions from my side. In your presentation, you said the insurance renewal, there's an increase, is it, of 116,000? Can you just explain how, what does it entail in terms of where the increase is coming from?
Do you want to?
Yeah. We usually go out for insurance contract for 5 years. And so when an insurance market is increasing year on year, the premiums are increasing. So what we had secured for 5 years ago, obviously after 5 years we won't get the same price. So that's the first factor. Second factor is I need to be very careful how I use, words. For cyber security, I won't go more detail than that. So that was another big chunk.
And second question from me. In the risks section, you said there's a potential rise in homelessness. I'm just trying to figure out if there's any contingency budget. I mean, obviously we can't predict the numbers of people who might turn up homeless in the future, but do we have any budget regarding it, and will it affect any of the other departments' budgets?
But that's what the grant's for. That's why we're given this big extra grants from the government.
At the moment, if you look at council's housing budget, and which mainly gears towards homelessness and homelessness prevention, is 1.3 million pounds. That is after allowing, that is a net budgetary requirement funded by council taxpayers. So government paying us the homelessness grant of 434,000 is only going to reduce that 1.3 million pounds requirement by 700,000. So the council taxpayers are still picking up that tab. But to come to to answer your question, why there is that risk? Yes, especially in Hertsmere, the land values are very high. Housing is very expensive. So the homelessness will increase, and especially when you look at the earnings to housing ratio, like, for mortgage purposes, on average it is 4 times the earnings nationally, while Hertsmere's average is 14 to 1. That shows the Hertsmere's land value and close proximity to London, putting the pressure on the housing.
That actually makes us the 3rd worst in the country, the 3rd most expensive, after, I think, the city of Westminster and somewhere else like that. So, yeah.
It certainly does and has knock-on effects everywhere. Can I just ask a question on that? The homeless prevention grant, is that linked to the affordability index? Or is it just across the board?
Prior to current government coming into power, I still remember there was a DC and District Council network meeting, and there was a lot of pressure at that time, shadow housing secretary, especially from Eastern region and Southeastern region, how the district councils are struggling with the cost of the private rented sector and overall homelessness cost.
Councillor Quilty, and then Councillor Morris, do you have a question?
Thank you. There's an awful lot of figures we talked about tonight, and certain amounts of money are ring-fenced. I wonder if you could actually tell me, or tell the residents at home, what does that actually mean, ring-fenced? And that's my first bit. I will come back in a minute.
It's a minimum that you have to spend on. So if, we are funded by the government for, normally we can spend the money on what we believe we need it on. If they want us to spend it on a particular thing, then they say you must spend at least that. But as with the homelessness, we can spend more if we wish. But it's a minimum amount of spend on something.
That's interesting. So it looks as if you're going to balance the budget by using homeless money, which is ring-fenced. Can you assure us now? That's what you said in the papers, it is. It mentions that it's ring-fenced. Would you like to tell? Shall I tell you which page? Page 25 of the next. Hang on. Well, I'll get it. I'll have to come back if you want to start talking. But it says in the papers it's a ring-fenced budget, and I'm rather surprised you're using ring-fenced money to balance the budget.
If you can find the page, because I don't recall reading that myself, and we can't balance the budget using a ring-fenced. Thank you. Can I just ask you, though, it's the general idea, though, of using money. Why would the government call it something and give us money, calling it a producer responsibility or money for the homeless, and not, I know it's not ring-fenced, but not expect us to use it on what the title is? And do you feel it's right?
So I think when a government gives money like this, particularly when they say it's not ring-fenced, it's an expectation that that's the minimum spend. It's not all of this money that has been given has to be spent on it and whatever you might have been spending before, because they don't know what we were spending before. With the extended producer responsibility, we are planning to spend most of that money dealing with waste. It's quite a small minority of it which is balancing the budget. And again, we already have a budget for dealing with waste that will cover that. We might have to do extra things. We might have to collect different things in different places. So there may be an additional cost to it. I suspect there will. But it's not £1 million, which is roughly what the grant is.
Councillor Quilty, yes.
Yes, I found it now. It's paragraph 6.20 on page 11 of 35. Right, and it states, whilst this grant is ring-fenced, so that's clearly, the way I read that, is it is ring-fenced. Now, if that's the case, are we allowed to balance the budget using ring-fenced money? That's my question.
You have to spend, if it's ring-fenced money, you have to spend at least that amount of money on that service. But we always have been. We are using this grant to spend more than the government is mandating us to spend. We're not adding it on to what we were spending already, but we are spending more than the government has mandated us to spend.
Well, let's be clear about this. You're not spending it on homeless people.
Well,
right?
we're spending...
No, you're not, because it's a ring-fence grant. You're not spending it on homeless people. You're spending it on housing, which is different.
It's a fungible asset. So the money, they have given us 1.1 million pounds for homelessness prevention. We spend more than that on homelessness prevention. On homelessness prevention, on that aspect. We have a budget for preventing homelessness, and it exceeds the amount of money that the government has given this year for that purpose.
Can I ask you then, what is the amount we spend on homelessness? And what is the amount budgeted for homelessness, please?
I have got the numbers in front of me for current financial year, and I can tell you our expenditure on temporary accommodation is budgeted at £1 million, and we receive from housing benefit and some tenants' contribution, budgeted at 640,000. While our actual performance shows, that means we're looking at 340,000 net expenditure. But currently, our performance shows that because of our good management, we are only spending net 180,000. So rather than spending £1 million on homelessness, we are spending 600,000 on homelessness expenditure, and we are getting somewhere 300,000 income from it, from government, from government housing benefit subsidy as well as tenants' income, and that is the current year's performance.
I think I understand, but I think we need some clarity from members of the public there, because you've said, and it's ring fence, which means there's a minimum spend, but the ring fence grant we're getting is £1.137 million. In the budget, is it clear that we are spending £1.137 million on temporary accommodation and homelessness? And I think it could be clarity of wording that's important there. And then if so, if we are, why is that not then in the next line offset against this grant, and then we're not using those words or this grant to help balance the budget? This is why I'm a bit unsure how it all fits in with what you've just said. You have to be, because it's a legal responsibility, as Councillor Quilty said, on a ring-fence budget, on a ring-fence grant.
Sorry, if I can just come in. The numbers I quoted, that is only for the cost of accommodation. On top of that, our staffing cost alone is in the region of 1.2 million, because the staff has to deal with this. And the numbers I said, £1 million, that is simply paying the rent to the private sector or whoever we get the accommodations from.
Apologies. I'm sure I have talked through this, and I am confident in my essential position, but I think I need to get you the numbers and clarify precisely, which I commit to do.
Thank you very much indeed for that. So, Councillor Quilty, did you have a second question, or was that it?
No, well, I could. I'll save it for later on. I was going to talk about, well, I could mention it now, but I think it would be more relevant later on.
Okay, we'll leave it later on. Can I ask Councillor Paul Morris, and then do you mind if I go to
Could we have a briefing note on all that, on the homelessness business, though, on the reason why we're spending ring-fence money on somewhere else, just to make sure it's so that all the committees, both committees, understand what it's about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, and in fact, I am confident we're not using ring-fence money, and I know we're not, but I think the wording and the clarity around it needs to just be made clearer for everybody. More transparent, that's the word, exactly. I am confident we're not, though. Councillor Paul Morris.
Thank you. I'm conscious of the fact that tomorrow night we will be discussing and debating a number of items, some of which will be adding to our annual budget, which is where I become concerned. And whilst I may well be supportive of some of the initiatives that are going to be put forward, I'm looking at an increase in some of the costs, and the fact that we started a new service last year, i.e. the wardens. And when we have a situation where we're already talking about a shortfall in budgets, how this is going to impact, because having had a meeting yesterday, we're all keen to not lose any of the services, of the service provision that we had. I am increasingly concerned when we're talking about a shortfall in the budget that we're talking about spending more money on new services that at the moment, according to what we're being told, we can't afford.
When you said wardens, did you mean the community enforcement officers?
Yes.
That's the kind of acid question, isn't it? And that is, in a sense, the conflict between people in my role, not just me, and the people who want to spend money. And whether it's in national government or in county councils or here, you will get people who are raising the money saying, no, you can't have any, you can't spend that. And there will be frank discussions, both in the group and in the cabinet, of, no, we can't afford that. So there are no services that we provide at the moment that I don't think are value for money and need to be provided. So I think defending the services is really important. If that means not creating new ones, not spending on other projects, then I think that's the inevitable consequence.
Sorry, does that inevitably mean then that what we're actually going to be doing is dipping into any of our reserves to try and fund these new services when we're already showing a budget shortfall?
I mean, fundamentally, you're not allowed to. So revenue has to be paid for by revenue. So revenue spend has to be paid by income that we generate as revenue. We might have special requirements that do not require short-term funding, which can be met as in other ways. But yeah, creating staff, creating long-term liabilities or whatever has to be met by revenue, and that's a discussion we will always have.
I'm not quite sure that I got the answer there, but I'll accept what you said.
Yeah, I mean, I have a question, but I'm going to just, Councillor Morris Bright, you've got a question.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to come in early, Chairman. It's just, as you know, Bournemouth are playing at home tonight, rescheduled match, and my younger son is there. They started at 7:45, and I'm hoping to get there very soon. I don't think he's noticed I'm not there yet. So thank you for allowing me to come in, and thank you to Councillor Shenton for his presentation, particularly under great pressure, big chamber, looking at all of us in the eyes, and Matthew Bunyan's is poorly. I hope it's nothing to do with putting all this budget together. It must be quite stressful, and I'm grateful to Councillor Shenton for his efforts tonight. I think coming over across very well for his second budgets. I've just got a couple of questions. I thought, by the way, the housing discussion about ring-fence grants was interesting. It reminds me very much of what they say about parking. Parking departments are not allowed to make a profit from all the charges that they make. And no, I don't think any councillor has ever shown a profit on parking with all the money it brings in. Funny old game, innit? But moving swiftly on. So the government's indicated there are councils that are writing to the government to ask them to allow them to lift the council tax cap or go out of the referendum. I know that in another place for the District Councils Network, the leader of the council here indicated that he can see the benefits of raising council tax above the 2.9%, 9% or the £5, whichever is greater. Can I therefore ask Councillor Shenton, as the Cabinet Member, if in the next couple of weeks there is an indication from government that in fact they would allow an increase above 2.99% or £5, but we'll just say 2.99%, is this something that would interest him? Would he be interested in going out to a referendum to say to people, actually, we want to charge more? We have to charge you more to be able to provide you services, or do you think you'll be able to stick with the 299 and you won't need to? Also, around the pay, it's a very interesting one, isn't it, that 3% council tax increase brings in £294,000. Without wishing to conflate, a 3% pay rise costs the council £532,000. And it's a difficult one to make the case out there sometimes when people are just suffering a little bit financially to say, well, all your council tax increase is going to be used to pay for a staff pay increase, and then we're still a couple of £100,000 short. Now, I'm not saying the staff don't deserve it. Absolutely, you know where my views have always been on that. And we do seem to be in line with what the government's recommending. I've just checked online, which is 2.8% for public sector. So we're in line with that. But as I say, sometimes it's about the optics, and I think that was some of the questions that were being asked before. Very important that people understand that we're doing our very best with the services to bring in as much as we can, or to save money where we can, but continue to provide services, and that we're not just asking you for some more money to pay other people, because as I've said, there's always a lack of sympathy for other people's pay when people are asked to pay for it. And finally, those are comments. The first one was a question about the council tax, if the government allows us to. Finally, I note that we're talking about a 2028, 2029, £672,000 gap. If and when we get a clearer indication as to whether the government is planning to scrap and or do away with districts and borough councils, would we then be able to, if we wanted to say we know that in a year's time the boroughs and districts may be gone, say 2 years after that, and we have certainty of that by then, would we be able to tap into the reserves more, where we have a difficulty in raising funds without having to keep charging the council taxpayer. In other words, we use it before whoever is in charge takes it away from us and spends it elsewhere.
Thank you, Councillor Bright. If I may take the second one first, I think it's certain, and previous instances, as soon as that the government will stop us blowing the reserves before we are merged into a unitary authority. How quickly they do it is, a moot point. We certainly wouldn't be able to have a sort of eve of merge party and spend all the money. There's a lot of speculation and a lot of uncertainty about what a unitary authority would look like. But it's almost certain that we would go into whatever we're part of with bigger reserves than the rest of them. So, yes, clearly, I would like to see some of that money spent providing services to the people who paid for it in the first place. On the question of if we had the opportunity to go above 3%, my inclination, and I would be arguing no, I would be presenting a case saying 3% is around inflation, slightly higher than September's CPI, which is the measure that we use. And my inclination would be to try to balance the budget without having to do that. I'd be very surprised, to be honest, if they did allow councils to go up, even though I have heard, as you say, of a number of councils asking for that. But okay.
Thank you for that. Members, any further questions on this part? Any Cabinet members want to say anything? Councillor Newmark.
Yeah, I wanted to make a couple of brief points. Firstly, to thank Councillor Shenton and the finance officers team for an incredibly thorough piece of work and what I think is an excellent, imaginative and ambitious budget under very, very difficult and tight circumstances. I think it's telling that today we've had a lot of very good questions, a lot of requests for clarification on various budget headings and language, but we've not had a single suggestion or proposal that anything here should be done differently. And I think that is a huge testimony to the work that's been done, the consultative process so far with the cross-party budget panel. And I know that that you and your team and ourselves and as administration are committed to a really genuine budget consultation process rather than just tick box exercise. I think the timing of the provisional financial settlement has meant that the draft budgets had to be put together and finalised much more quickly than has been the case previously. And I'm really reassured that in the papers, and as you said to us at Cabinet, Councillor Shenton, any changes that come about as a result of the consultation and as a result of listening to the discussion tonight and listening to the public will be changes that don't represent weakness in any sense, but actually represent the strength of the listening exercise that we've engaged with. I think there were a couple of points, including from Councillor Morris, about the extent to which a tight budget of this nature might prevent new initiatives or expansion of some of our non-statutory services over the course of the year. And I think that one of the things I'm really pleased about when I look at this budget is that it doesn't in any way stifle the ambition and initiative that's been shown by this administration. Clearly, we could strip programmes back to the bone and things would become a lot more comfortable in terms of the numbers, but we haven't. We've been innovative and we've been creative, and we'll continue to find ways to fund those non-statutory services. I think the civic enforcement officers are a really good example where we managed to bring in new revenue streams during the course of the current financial year, working together with the new Police and Crime Commissioner on the hotspot funding to actually extend the daily hours of those patrols in certain areas of the borough that are particularly susceptible to antisocial behaviour. And it will always be the case that we will be alert and on the lookout for opportunities for new revenue streams that come about during the course of the financial year to enable us to continue to innovate and fuel the ambition that we have. You know, we create budgets once a year, and it would be very easy to say, as I think that perhaps had been a tendency to say here in the past, that's our budget, that's what we work with, and that's what we do. But there are funding opportunities that emerge over the course of the year, every year, and we will continue to grab those. And just because an income line appears in this budget doesn't mean that it won't grow during the course of the year. And we've been very successful in doing that across multiple areas. So this is in no sense a budget for sitting back or a budget for constraint. Otherwise, we'd never do anything new. And I also wanted to touch on the second point that Councillor Bright made in terms of use of reserves as we approach a potential unitarisation scenario. And I want to say two brief things about that. Firstly, the only thing that is certain as a consequence of the English Devolution White Paper is that the County Council will disappear, and that we will, in some shape or form, have an elected mayoralty covering a relatively wide geography. Even today, we saw the statement from the local government and devolution minister saying that no area will be absolutely required to engage in the reorganisation process. So, first of all, I think there is everything to play for, and if it is decided collectively that unitarisation is not the right thing for this area, or large unitaries are not the right thing for this area, then that's a debate that we're not accepting or admitting defeat on right now, and it's a debate that will continue. Secondly, in that regard, as Councillor Shenton quite rightly said, we have assets. There are other authorities around here that has deficits. I think if we have one fundamental duty as councillors from all parties, it's to ensure that reserves that have been built up on the back of the hard-earned money from people's pockets in this area are not used to plug the gaps of less well-managed authorities from elsewhere. And we'll talk about this in more detail tomorrow night, and I think we will hopefully be able to start to put in place some mechanisms to mitigate against that risk. Secondly, our reserves are not our only assets. In this area, we have tangible, physical property assets, both on the council's own books, in the books of some of our subsidiary companies and so on, that have equally been built up on the backs of local council taxpayers, and that do a tremendous job contributing to local prosperity, local economy and so on. And I think we are beholden as local councillors and under a really firm obligation to protect those assets from the possibility of being sold off to developers in order to plug years of mismanagement of budgets like social care and special educational need. You know, our assets as a community are currently quite well protected from that because those services don't fall in our remit. If we're looking at a scenario where a new authority in this area does have to contribute towards those services, we need to make sure that they don't do it at the expense of those assets that contribute to our community. So I think in a way it's not part of the figures that appear in the budget paper, but it is a huge part of the financial strategic planning that we need to do to ensure the long-term well-being as local people, and it runs absolutely in tandem with the budget process that today's discussion is part of.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Newmark, is there anything further we need to ask? Nope. So the actions we'd like to take, thank you very much for on agenda item 5. Obviously, there's been quite a few things for you to take away, Councillor Shenton, and one or two items, ideas to come back to us for clarification and maybe some changes, which hopefully we'll see when the final budget comes through. But thank you very much for, at the moment, for the consultation on the revenue budget. We'll now move on to item 6, which is the capital budget, and we'll do it in the same way.
Thank you, Councillor Shenton. This slide shows us the current capital programme. Prior to 24-25 financial year's additions, the capital programme stood at 34.833 mil. During 24-25, another 7.5 million added to it, and you will see that quite a significant number of expenditure has been either going to be funded from SIL, Section 106, and number of different sources, but by definition, they are still capital project. So total, as at 24-25, the current capital program shows 42.2 million, and then 25-26, we are anticipating 2.4, which came from previous year's slippages, and 749 year after that. Next page. Next page, you also, we do get disability facilities grant, which is given to environmental health, but they are also under the accounting regulation treated as capital, but they are fully funded from the disabilities facilities grant, and that stands at 855,000. As a part of the capital budget yearly reporting, we review the capital projects. The capital projects which are not moving forward, we request the council to be removed. And there has been, when you look at the bottom table, there are 4 capital projects in relation to Ulster Studios, totaling £7 million are requested to be removed from this capital project works. Okay, so moving forward.
We should have done that one first.
Yeah.
So we should have done that one first, which shows what it was at 43 million, and then moving on to this one, which shows that it is 39.
So at the moment, so we are saying that at 24-25, the capital project will be 35 million, 25-26, 2.5 million, and total for by end of 27-28, we are looking circa 40 million. And the capital program funding is shown in the table below. The capital receipts, we are looking at spending 8.44 million, while DFG or Disabilities Facilities Grant 1.2 million. We may have to go for borrowing 1.1 million, and other earmarked reserves, for example, vehicle purchases, which is waste vehicle purchases, which we every year we create the sinking fund and put provision towards it. Similarly, SIL and Section 106 funding 8.7 million, and that's how the budget, capital budget, is going to be funded. More than happy to take questions.
Yes, this is just clarification. In our papers on page 159, the revised capital budget for 24-25, it may be me getting it wrong, I'm sure it is 42,234. And this there says 35,149. So, 159, table 2. Table 2, page 159.
So basically, we still come back to 35 million. So can we just go back to this slide, the previous slide?
Sorry, I need to get, because surely a budget for 24-25 is when you've removed the programs that you want to remove.
No, we will remove it for next year.
Thank you.
Because we will need council's approval for that.
So this, next year's budget is less than this year's budget. So this year's budget was 42 million. We're taking 7 million out of that, which was down to the film studios. And the reason we're taking out of the film studios is with the view that we might be seeking a partner who might not want us to spend that money. So it's we've taken it out. This is a rolling programme, of course, so this isn't necessarily all the money that will be spent next year or in the next 3 years. New capital projects can get added at any time. At the moment, there are no new projects being added to this. We haven't approved any new projects, which is why nothing goes into it, but there's no reason to suppose that they may not be added during the year.
Members' questions? Councillor George.
Thank you, Councillor Cohen. So for the last year, we had quite a large slippage in 23-24 budget of about 14 million, and that has an impact on our treasury and kind of like the decisions that we make based on whether or not we think we can lock away money for a longer period of time to get a better return, or whether or not we can we're going to need to borrow and from potentially other authorities to fund any shortfalls and things like that. So it's very important that where we're making these kind of capital decisions at this stage, that we're kind of certain that we're going to be able to carry them out within that year, because otherwise it has an impact on our kind of cash flow situations. Do you feel that we have a large enough amount or too large amount of capital expenditure within the next year, or do you feel that we've got a reasonable amount that we'll be able to achieve within that year? Thank you.
Yeah, we always make sure that we have got reasonable balances, and we try to make sure that we do not go into borrowing, because borrowing is always expensive due to the interest rate. So we always look at our average balances we collect from. So if we have to do internal borrowing, which is basically when we collect the council, we collect on behalf of county and other precepting body 84 million pounds. So similarly, we receive 60 odd million pounds for housing benefits, but we have to pay on monthly basis. And the good part of the good treasury management is you try to forecast that you will receive less and you will pay more. So the precepting bodies, rather than them retaining higher amount, we retain higher amount. So answer to your question, yes, we always try to make sure we have got reasonable steps in place for the treasury management.
Can I just...
So I'm more asking if we have a reasonable amount of capital projects that we can achieve within that year, and that obviously has an impact on the amount that we're funding for capital.
We will fund, so the capital projects are funded over a long time, typically, and we will, even if we use our own funds, our own capital to fund it, we will cost the project on the basis of PSBR rates, public sector borrowing requirement rates. So the project stands or fails on whether it is funded externally. It may be funded internally, and that way we make a better return on our investment, but it will be costed on the basis, justified on the basis that it can be paid for through borrowing.
On that point, can I just... So we've got a budget of £42 million. That money isn't spent immediately. So what happens to that money? Are we investing that money short term? Are we getting interest on that? And then where does that interest go?
Oh, yes. Overnight, we have special overnight investment strategies.
We're actually earning money till it's spent.
Of course. This is where 2.5 million investment interest comes from.
Good.
Yes, that was a figure that we quoted. So there were two figures, one of loans that we have made to other bodies, which was quite a high rate, and then loans in the money markets, which is what you can get over, for whatever period you want to invest for.
Can I ask Councillor Shenton this question? If we look at the end of the document, the report, it says about projects, and it's got project references, and two of them are SIL projects, which are great projects, and they're up there, Breakspear School and Potters Bar Football Club. Can I ask how that decision is, when the decision is made, what makes you decide when to have it from the capital, council money, or we use it from SIL money? For example, we've got Allam Lane Cemetery Extension. What would make that be a decision to be a SIL funded application or not? How do you decide that?
There are more constraints on some types of monies than others. So Section 106 money is quite highly constrained. SIL money is not as tightly constrained, and then our own assets we can do what we like with, within reason. So you would tend to use them in that order. Are the constraints of where the money came from? So if it's a Section 106, is it constrained to being used on a type of thing or in a place? SIL, as I say, that much more flexible. Our own assets are our own assets. So yeah, you would always use 106 first if you could.
Just on one of them, is Meadow Park Phase 2, 749,000. I thought that had been agreed to be a SIL bid.
I can check. Yeah.
Sorry, I haven't got down.
Okay, members. Councillor Allen.
Yeah. Fairly similar territory, actually, because perhaps it's mainly a presentational thing. But in the list here, for example, as Harvey mentioned, there's quite a lot of big SIL projects there. But qualitatively, for example, £1 million for Potters Bar Football Club is very different from buying new pay and display machines for the car parks, and different also from the new trucks for the food waste recycling. Is there a presentational case for separating them out, because they are the origin and the purpose of those projects, and the funding is very different? And secondly, it's a very vague and open-ended question, but obviously the sum of money earmarked for this coming year, much, much smaller. Bits and pieces come along. In the last year, lots of bits and pieces might not have forecast, plus things which sort of were opportunities. For example, 80 Shenley Road have enough bits and pieces and opportunities been factored in.
This is, I won't put him on the spot, but this is up to a large degree an asset management question for Councillor Newmark, but I won't put him on the spot. Yeah, we do look at opportunities of where the council can buy something for a long-term return. I mean, the capital projects are funded on long-term borrowing, which differentiates them from the revenue, and whether we fund that through SIL, Section 106 or anything else is kind of irrelevant to the fact that it's spend. So it's why it's all put in the same place. I could speak to the head of finance and see if he thinks that we might present them differently to show publicly how we're using the SIL money better. But yeah, it's all the same type of money, really.
I think that would be good. I think it's important. Can I just go to a point that Councillor Newmark mentioned about the revenue budgets, and he talked about words like enterprising, ambitious and innovative. He keeps using these words quite regularly. Does that show us a enterprising, ambitious and innovative council when we see spending and changes and we see no budget, a massive reduction from 34.5 million to zero in the next year and the next year afterwards? What's the thoughts and ideas? Have we got any ideas where we're going to be spending the money? We have 20 million at least in SIL. I don't see any ambition or anything enterprising in this capital budget at all.
You'd be surprised to hear, I think that's a fair point. This is a rolling programme, so we are obliged by the accounting rules, by law, to report it every year. It doesn't mean that that's how it stays. It doesn't mean that it has to wait until next year. And we have just finished large programmes here in this building and in the studios. But yes, we ought to be, and we plan to be, looking at SIL bids. I don't think we had any suitable SIL bids very recently. You know, the ones that we know about, Potterbar Football Club, King George V Park, are that little bit older, so that they're in last year's budget. But yes, we will be looking for new projects that can be funded.
Thank you. So we will be looking for them from outside stakeholders, but the council has no new ideas. Is that what you're saying?
We'll be looking for people to come forward with projects, and that might be internal as well as external.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. No, I disagree. I think there is clearly ideas, because we've got purchases of free plots of land in Potterbar. So there is a forward vision for those pieces of land, because either something's going to be built or developed. So can that be, there must be a plan and a budget for that. Can that go in the 25-26 line or 26-27? Because we wouldn't have purchased land as an authority unless we thought that it could make a revenue for us in the future.
No, I haven't got the answers at hand. We can come back to you.
Councillor Giorgio.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask as well if we've considered what our policy is around. I mean, we've got big risks in our borough, as we've mentioned, about house prices and homelessness and things like that. What our policy is around kind of like how we order or have preference for certain types of developments, and how we then allocate our capital budget to try and say, well, this is the kinds of developments that we want to prioritise first, whatever they might be, whether it is purchasing land to build new housing, or whether it is new park equipment, or whether it, whatever it might be, and whether or not we need that, again, which you mentioned, like kind of strategy around the capital budget in terms of what our priorities would be in terms of how we will allocate capital budget. Because I can see, yes, as we've mentioned, there are lots of projects that we have completed, and I think that's really good to see that we're completing lots of projects rather than kind of having lots of ideas, but not actually getting any of them to fruition. But if we're going to be looking at our strategy for what we're going to be looking to develop next, how do we want to kind of prioritise where we'd be looking at this stage, or should we kind of set that now? Yep. Thank you.
I think, so I can answer that, because I think in Appendix B, it says aims, key priorities and targets of the capital programme. And that was what my question was leading to, and you said it in a slightly different way, but I can't see the targets in that, or any of the aims, or the priorities, and they're not there. But they are quite articulated in Appendix B, but we don't seem to have, we have the words, but not the programme. Any members' questions? Councillor Lambert.
Thank you, Chair. We are an affluent authority, and we've got significant reserves, and that's a good thing. I've got two questions. The first one is, are we accumulating reserves year on year faster than we are spending them on capital projects? So have we got our reserves going up or reserves coming down in general terms? And how do you feel about whether they're going up or down or holding steady?
Interestingly, this year we have spent a huge amount of money out of our reserves on the studios. And I don't think there's another authority in Hertfordshire, certainly that I know of, that could have weathered that storm. It's a eight-figure sum that we've spent on the studios. And it does mean that our long-term income is now reduced considerably. We still have good reserves, and we should be looking to utilise those reserves for projects that benefit the residents. We need more things to come through SIL and from other sources.
And the second part of my question, I'm not sure that how closely it actually deals with the capital programme that we've got here at the moment. Bearing in mind that some form of devolution might be coming down the track at us, and given that cash at the bank is easier to transfer from one body to the next, is there an argument in your mind of spending it on capital projects within the borough and committing them to capital projects within the borough? And at what point will you consider that?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. I think we have far better assets than other boroughs that we are likely to be merged with. And I suspect that the product of a merger will have the money spread evenly around. So, yes, I think it is important that we look at viable projects that are not frivolous, improve the quality of life in Hertsmere, and look to develop, yes.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Morris and then Councillor Quilty.
Thank you. You may well say that the question I'm going to ask is covered in another area, but there is a project that has been now in development, if I put it that way, for a considerable number of years, which is Bushy Country Club. And whilst we're not necessarily spending lots of money at it at the moment, I'm aware that the work is being done on it. And as you've just rightly said, anything that we spend now would mean it's not going to get spent by somebody else going down the track. And I just wonder how we're accounting, and I appreciate we're probably looking for a joint venture partner, but we're incurring, or should be incurring, expenses looking at that site, and I'd just be interested to know how that is being accounted for.
As you said, Councillor Morris, that it is a joint venture, so the land belongs to us, and we are waiting to hear from the joint venture expression of interest, what they propose, but my anticipation is they will bring the cash for the construction, and at the end of the project, the total cost and total revenues will be split in according to the contribution made by the land value as well as the cost of the construction.
That answers half my question, but the other half is we must have been spending money up until now. How is that accounted for?
So far, we haven't, spent significant sums or, any large sums. Is mainly on the feasibility studies, and we have got, feasibility studies, reserve. And that's where it is get accounted from. We have a number of council's feasibility studies.
Yeah, I think the funding was agreed in the council papers for the feasibility, and I presume when it becomes a project, if it does become a council project, we would then put it. Then it won't.
Project doesn't go ahead, then it becomes the sunk cost.
Thank you. Councillor Quilty and then Councillor Shah.
Yeah, thank you. Purchase of street scene vehicles. It's quite a considerable amount of money here. And we have a sinking fund, Chief Executive has advised us. How much is in the sinking fund, and should we be utilising our capital via leasing vehicles rather than purchasing?
Right. First of all, I can't give you the straight answer because, about how much is in the sinking funds. I can come back to you on that. But the question
You
about
could circulate
the leasing,
that to all members, because I'll raise it tomorrow otherwise.
but the question about whether to lease or whether to purchase outright, yes, as a finance professional, I will always say, if you got money, always purchase it, but do not lease it only unless it is exceptional circumstances such as leisure fitness equipment, because they tend to go out of fashions far too quickly and their usage is higher. But when it comes to council's vehicle purchases, we have done umpteen number of studies and it's always cost effective and financially effective to purchase from the council's own sinking fund or provisional fund rather than leasing, because leasing charges you the cost of financing in itself.
Mr. Chairman, if I can come back, I'm sure I agree with the chief executive there but there's benefits to leasing which could significantly benefit this council, plus the fact we would have a large sum of money available to spend on various projects that you might want to spend on. And I think that we should actually have a look at this in greater detail. It's very easy to say, if we got the money, buy, but I think it's a lot better if we actually examined this in greater detail and did a scrutiny report on it.
Okay, I think that was a comment. We'll ask. Thank you. We'll ask for information. Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
Two contradictory points, but worth noting. If we start spending our capital, we're going to be reducing our investment income. And if we're using our investment income to fund our budget, balance our budget, there could be issues there. So that's something to bear in mind. But on the other hand, if we've got reserves, why would we need to go into a joint venture to develop the Bushy Country Club when we could do it ourselves? Now, things have changed because of the latest government directive about devolution. So I'm just wondering why we can't go alone and get this done through HDL or someone like that.
Because of the scale of the project, we don't believe we've either the in-house skills or capacity to do it. So it's far more secure, far safer to partner with somebody who we do believe has the skills and capacity.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Newmark, is that a question?
Got it. Yeah, it's really to ask Councillor Shenton if he agrees that the sort of earlier points that were made by Councillor Allen on the presentation of the capital budget, capital programme, and the comments from Councillor Cohen about whether or not it reflects lack of ambition are actually linked, because isn't it the case that really the system forces us to present what it calls a capital budget actually in this form, which isn't really a budget at all. It's a 3-year programme, and what used to happen is that a previous administration would sort of lump everything that they might possibly do in terms of capital expenditure into a 3-year programme to fit the system that's pushed upon us. And then what would happen is that you'd get this thing where year by year it would all be marked out as slippage. You must remember that we sort of consistently had that, whereas what I think we've actually done is strip this back to basics so that it's a more honestly presented presentation of that capital expenditure, which we know is pretty much already on the cards. And of course the framework enables us to bring forward capital projects at any point in the cycle. That's why sort of calling this a budget is a little bit of a nonsense. And I think that Councillor Shenton would probably agree with me that over the next 2.5 years, this administration will probably be bringing forward both more and more exciting capital projects for our major towns than this borough has seen for many decades in the past. And I think it's something that we will probably be in a position to talk more about when we hit the budget meeting in February. But our major town centres are in need of serious regeneration, and if there is a direction in which our capital programme is heading, if there is a reason that we have started to acquire assets in key strategic areas, it's all about that.
Yeah, thank you. Do you want to comment on that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I do broadly agree that this is pared back. It's to what is on the cards at the moment, but it is the hope that we will be generating revenue, we will be improving our revenue position by using our assets. There's no point sitting it in the bank, and we get some money for that, but we can deliver value to the community.
And I fully agree with that, and I would support it 100%. One thing I just want to ask, if there's just as a last thing, and it's about HDL, and because it's capital, I mean, we give money, and I know it's separate, but there's been no reporting even in the revenue or any income about HDL. Is HDL producing any income to the council at all, or is it, because I don't think it's been mentioned in any of the budgets at all?
I will find out the legal position of reporting the subsidiaries. I mean, we're not reporting EFS either. So, yeah, I'll take that away and find out what our reporting position is for subsidiary companies.
That was the question. Any dividends? Yeah, okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. Any further questions? So, Councillor Shenton and your team, and Matthew Bunyan especially, and his team, and Sajida as well, this is admirable. It's a mighty piece of work, and it's also great that you come to our committee and be scrutinised, and you're still smiling at the end of it, and so we thank you very much for coming, and we know how much work goes into this. We all admire the amount of work, and we thank you, the whole team, all the finance team at the council for the work. It's never ending, and I'm sure it's thankless. So thank you very much for all the work and for attending and for the budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cohen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, we're going to go to item 7, the portfolio update. Would you like a 5-minute? We'll have a 5-minute break. The time is now 20:53. We'll have a 7-minute break, and we will resume at 9 o'clock. Absolutely, always. It's scrutiny, isn't it? Thank you.
have to consider the strategic future of the studios. Now that we've fixed them, put them on a reasonably solid basis, we nonetheless have to think about what we want to do as an authority and whether this is our business. I won't go through that bit because you've just been talking about it for 2 hours. So this, I think, refers to the question the Chair, Councillor Cohen, asked at the beginning. Yes, the current strategy is till 2022. The review has been delayed, although perhaps should have been delayed by less. And it is in the process of being refreshed. It's one of our priorities, and we plan to deliver in the middle of the year, by the middle of the year. Clearly, financial self-sustainability is crucial to an authority like ours. We're not going to be on the best end of government largesse, and to be frank, we oughtn't to be. Many authorities have a far more difficult position than we do, and that's we live with that and be self-sufficient. We need to be secure. We need to be secure in our reserves and our borrowing. Utilise our assets properly. Elstree Studios, we know, I was just speaking to Councillor Garza, we've put on a good footing. It is in an infinitely better place than it was a year ago. The fact that we can use Studio 7, 8, set 7, 8 and 9, stages 7, 8 and 9, is a huge bonus. But it's not finished, and we do ask ourselves, ought a local authority be running a film studios? Have we the skills or the time? Bushy Golf and Country Club is in the process of being developed into a community hub and to provide some much needed housing, but to keep the vast majority of it as a park. We will be reporting back to that, I'm sure, during the year. Newbury's car park, again, there are no plans on it at the moment, but it is a huge asset of this council, and it's last time I was there, the surface wasn't in the greatest of states either. Our subsidiaries, as Councillor Cohen mentioned, Elstree Film Studios, Hertsmere Development Limited, Hertsmere Leisure Limited. Yeah, we don't report to the budget panel, but yes, I think there needs to be some mechanism for saying what's happening. So our procurement strategy was approved to 2023, and the action plan is updated annually. The strategy takes into account the national and regional context, and also there's been a change in that the Procurement Act was put on the statute book last year, or the year before last. We are of review dates for 2024 to pick up the council's priorities and changes. I believe that that's been brought forward to the annual council, or something is. So, the Act that none of us, I suspect, will be familiar with brought those various changes. I won't read them out. And yes, so I thought I'd read this. The strategy timetable is for the recommendations to be adopted by council this February, at the same time as the budget council. The financial systems project, again, basically we're looking at our how we host our computer systems, how they're supplied, the disaster recovery and the resilience and so on. We probably, authorities like ours, the size of ours, don't really have the scale to be running computer departments. It is more efficient, it's probably more cost effective to put these on clouds, to outsource the maintenance of the systems, and for us to just be users of them. And it does, of course, support agile working, which is an ever increasing preference of our staff, and we have a smaller building accordingly. Progress has been slower than we would have liked, but it is moving. And we've identified a number of issues that are being resolved. We're currently in the final stages of testing, and we plan to go live in the next financial year. Revenue bins moving to the cloud as well. Again, the go live anticipation June, July this year. Elstree Film Studios, the strategy is, we've spoken about at great length. Stages 7, 8, 9 are returning to use this year, and we have already entered soft market testing to see what interest there is in partnering the council and procuring a strategic partner for the studios. We don't have the senior management available, if nothing else, to run a studios. There's a huge amount of money will be needed to bring, particularly those older stages, up to modern standard, and that's not our business. We're a local council. So that is all I have to say on the matter. Questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shenton. Indeed. Hands, Councillor Giorgio.
There we go. Thank you. Could you just expand a bit more about the financial system project and what we mean when we say same supplier as current system? Is it that they're providing to us as a software as a service? Are we getting it in terms of we are hosting the solution and they're just providing the software layer, or are we just using their software on a private cloud that we're going to be creating?
I believe it's software as a service. It is the same supplier as the other major systems. There are 3 major suppliers in the market, but it's actually very, very difficult to move from one to the other. The costs of the migration are very high. So, yeah, we are taking out our hardware, so we're removing the requirement to back up and things like that, install updates. We're just using software as a service, but through the same supplier.
If I may also ask just a follow-up question, could you let us know a little bit more about what kinds of efficiencies we're expecting through automation? Are we expecting that we'll need less officer time because they will be doing less manual processes, and that may then have a saving as a result of that? Employee time is probably one of our biggest expenses as a council, and so if we can do things to help employees be more efficient, that could be a big cost saving.
Yeah, I mean, certainly not managing hardware, doing the backups, doing the updates and whatever is a staff saving. We're removing some posts because of that. There are high costs as well. We're also removing a considerable amount of risk, because the risk of hacking and things like that is put onto the people who are providing the service. It's up to them to provide backups and, resilience alternatives should their hardware go down. Whereas if we're running it, it's all our responsibility, and it's an increasingly onerous one. So,
sorry, if I could ask more about side of the financial systems processes. Are there going to be efficiencies in those processes? So is there, currently we might do a calculation by hand for certain things, or currently we might spend a lot of time gathering different reports and data and putting them together. And are there any efficiencies that we know of in the new system that we're moving to in the cloud that will, or is there any way you can expand on that? Or
in terms of functionality, I'm not aware of any differences. I can find out. There probably will be, just as things evolve. I think it is more a movement of platform rather than enhanced facilities, though. That's my understanding, but I will check.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan, then Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair, and it's an unenviable portfolio that you have, Councillor Shenton. And there's lots that are planned out of our control, but there's also risks that we have forecasts. And as a member risk management champion, what level of financial risk are we operating at presently? And if this is a high level, how are we offering higher levels of assurance to stakeholders, including residents, that we can keep moving forward or remain stable financially?
I can't give you a number. We are, I would say, a risk-averse organisation. I think the full-time staff, the permanent staff, are inclined to be safe. You would have noticed that our insurance costs have gone up quite substantially, and that's kind of part of it. We're taking out bigger cover, even though We are doing, we have constant checks and tests on people to make sure they're not responding to spam emails and things like that. Moving to the cloud and having somebody else look after it does increase your security. I mean, they have staff for that. They have plenty of staff for it. So it is a more expensive option, but it is a more secure option as well. So, yeah, we are risk averse. We are making steps to increase our resilience and security.
With Elstree Film Studios, and for transparency, I'm a council-appointed non-executive director of EFS. Could you tell us a bit more about some of the scenarios that you would particularly welcome? Because I agree that it's a very good idea to explore bringing in an external partner for investment. But there are a number of different models for how that could work, and you could see a scenario where they, for the investment they provide, they maybe take a chunk of the shares in the business and a share of future profits, which would reduce the revenue that this authority receives from EFS's tills. What kind of, obviously there are many options still in play, and this is being worked out, but what for you would be the ideal scenario?
Thank you. It's a good question. And as you know, I was brought up in Elstree. I walked past the studios for many decades, too many to count. And I do have, and I think a lot of people who are from this area have a sentimental attachment to it, as well as a hard-headed value for money attachment to it. I am very keen that any partner carries on making films there, films and television there. I think that's our heritage, it's important industry, it's a very good quality industry, provides good quality jobs. So if we wanted to build houses on it, we'd have done that ourselves. We want a partner who wants to make film and television there. The expectation, I think, was that there would be a share perhaps ever so slightly in our favour, with a 51% share for us, or something like that. But we will inevitably lose profits, because somebody has to take profits for all the investment they're expected to put in. The soft market testing has been pretty successful. A lot of people have expressed interest, and people that we would, on the face of it, like to work with have seemed to be interested. That there is something in the heritage of the site. You know, the name has some value within the film industry. I mean, you work in that industry. And the closeness to London. I mean, somewhere like Pinewood, Shepperton, and some of these very new ones that have been built are further out. You know, you can catch the train in 20 minutes into central London here. So it is attractive. We have had positive feedback from the people we've engaged to look at it. We're not going to make a killing, but hopefully we should be on much more secure and reliable footing in the future.
Can I ask a question on it? We had an emergency council meeting, I don't even know when, about 7, 8 and 9. You were here. How much of, now with hindsight, do you consider that we should have had an emergency meeting? Do you consider it was the right course of action? And how much of the money we set aside have we actually had to use to remediate 7, 8 and 9?
So I don't get. Are you thinking of the one that was the small number of councillors?
One about the racks, the cement, the concrete, and the.
So, I mean, So we've discovered two things, haven't we? In 7, 8, 9. We had
the one before October, when we all were invited.
Yeah, we have rack concrete, which means the roof might collapse at any minute. We've probably all seen photos of schools where the roof did collapse. It's a dangerous thing. And we had an especially dangerous form of asbestos in the walls. So two entirely different but very serious problems. The timeliness of the solution was also fairly crucial to its success, I think. At the time, I recall Councillor Hodgson-Jones saying we need to spend more time to think about this. And given that we've changed what we've done over the year, you can see the sense in that. But I think we were in a position where we could have sought more information and more information ad infinitum, and it was costing us money not to take a decision. So I can understand people questioning how come you said you were going to do this and then you did this. Perfectly fair question. But I think all of the decisions were reasonable at the time on the evidence that we had, and that the timeliness was important. We couldn't just wait until we got more information. And it has turned out, I think, as well as we could reasonably have expected.
Page 191, you talk about the new benefits of the new system will be to support agile working. What is the status of agile working among the finance team? The status of agile working, what's their work from home ratios, etc.?
There was a degree of antipathy towards working from home in the organisation. But one of the useful things, I think, one of the interesting things that came out of the peer review that we did was the clear, more than strong wish from the staff to have the opportunity, where appropriate and where it worked for the organisation. We will always have challenges of recruitment and retention, and that comes into it. Flexibility of working. For some jobs, I mean, for some things it's wholly inappropriate, but there are a number of jobs where it does work. And I think the authority collectively has taken the view that we are more minded to adopt more flexibility in work patterns.
Councillor Kaza.
This first, of course, is, I must have sure, is agreed by Council October 2024. It says 2025, not very serious, but no? Okay, that's, because it was just taking my hand. Okay, let me come to the question then. Yeah, let me come to the question. We are behind most others when it comes to migration to cloud. It obviously cuts down staff, cuts down a lot of other work that you need to have, maintenance work, anything for that matter. People can work from home, access their data and all that stuff. You know the benefits anyway. Whenever we go for presentations given by anybody, fintech, boroughs for that matter, or even in our own labor meetings, the word AI comes up first. Whereas, I know you're not a cabinet member for it, but I think we should have more of it from somewhere. I mean, whether it comes to housing benefits, whether it comes to employee frauds, a lot of detection is being made thanks to this. Connecting dots which are apparently unrelated. Samantha saying if we can at least start off, since we're talking about strategy, long term and other stuff, I thought I'll ask you about this.
Yeah, I mean, we have just started a sort of little working group, a project to look at implementing AI. It's a lot of people are selling systems that they claim to be AI that are nothing of the sort, and we have to have. I mean, from my position, I'm saying this is fine, but does it reduce costs? Does it? We have in a lot of areas, in most areas, we have a fixed amount of work to do. So we can't generate more work. We are doing the work. If you take planning, for instance, we have a certain number of planning applications, and that's all we have. So being more efficient with the same number of staff doesn't help because there's no more scope to do more work. You have to be looking at these things of how it saves typically on staffing or equipment. Now, that doesn't mean making people redundant because we have a huge staff turnover. So it just means over a period of time not replacing so many people. But we have to see AI projects not in terms of what some salesman will tell us wonderful things it does, but how does it affect our cost base? How does it improve or maintain what we're doing, but at lower cost? And yes, there is a working group that's only just set up, had one meeting. I think it probably needs to be chivied along a bit. There is another working group with some neighbouring councils to look at specifically planning. There's scope, but these things move rather too slowly, I think.
Can I just go back to a question that was asked previously, I think, by Councillor Sullivan? And it's really, really important, as I'm sure you're aware, and for you especially, is risk management, financial risk management. We've got on page 185 this funding gap of 1.3 million. We've got the studios you've alluded to as a risk to us. What level of risk are we working at now financially? Is it a high risk? Is it red?
We've always been risk averse. The staff that we tend to employ are risk averse, and when we take out loans, they have to be very highly rated, AAA rated or something like that. And the strategy is written down on what we're doing. I would say we are being quite proactive in controlling our risk. As I say, there's a big risk around prevention of service and hacking generally, and we have we are taking proactive steps to reduce our risk in that. We're also, as we mentioned, taking out insurances to reduce our exposure to that. The move to the cloud reduces our risk. So I wouldn't say in most our investments are always very high rated. I wouldn't say that we are a particularly risky organisation.
No, but sorry, would you consider a funding gap of 1.3 million over the next 3 years a high risk? And do you consider now, at this present time, you may not want to answer this in this venue, in this arena, but the studios could be high risk. Is it value for money at the moment to us?
I think there is a general acceptance throughout the whole council, I think, that a medium-sized local authority shouldn't be running film studios. It's not what we do, it's not our business. And we are taking active steps to effectively reduce that risk, to bring in a partner with industry expertise, with access to funds, and also with a greater expertise than we did. You know, I think, I'm not trying to point blame, I'm certainly not trying to point political blame, but you can see that the reasons we had the trouble with the rack concrete and the asbestos was inadequate asset management. And that, I think, is what you get out of a small organisation that doesn't do this business trying to run a studios.
Yeah, I agree. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. Yeah, so just circling back to the point I was trying to make earlier was just that. Are we self-aware as an authority about risk? And we've obviously got policies and safeguards, and we've got monitoring officers and all of that, because if a process is done in a certain way, then we can pick up those risk points at different points. But if they fail anywhere along the line, which some of them can do because they're not legally bound kind of processes, what is our risk factor on that? So how do we continually keep going? Because some local authorities, through kind of that lack of governance and procedure, have had central government intervention quite quickly, and it wasn't a long slope to that point of being really highly in financial risk.
So just for my, are we talking about deliberate actions that could be seen as risky, or complacency that could be seen as risky?
Yeah, I suppose about not, if procedures weren't followed through and we've got all of our safeguards, would we be able to pick it up at every point, or are there gaps? Because that would be, we might need to go and look for a better assurance model on how we could safeguard. For example, it goes to certain services, and it will go to committees, and it will go to cabinets, and it will go to full council. But are there ways in there where that could be breached and we could be in a financial situation?
Can we have a chat afterwards and you can explain what... I don't entirely understand the question, which I will accept as being me being stupid, but if we have a quick chat and you can explain what you're getting at and I'll find out for you. Is that okay? Sorry,
It's to do with the risk management process, but yeah, absolutely. Any further questions? I think you are now let off, Councillor Shenton. At 9:30, you've had a long evening and you've answered our questions magnificently. And thank you very much for joining us tonight. Thank you. We note your report, and I'm sure you'll take away the many ideas and thoughts that have come from our committee. And thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you, members. So we're now going to move to agenda item 8, which is the procurement strategy update report, because if you remember at our meeting on the 5th of December, we considered the draft corporate procurement strategy, and we had some extra questions we wanted answered. And in light of the fact that the head of procurement isn't here, I think Alex has an update for us.
A brief update, yes, thank you, Chair. The recommendations that the committee had for the procurement manager centred around language in the strategy about social value and commitments to net zero carbon emissions. Those outlined in paragraph 3.7 of the report that you have in front of you. As you'll see, changes have been made to the strategy attached to Appendix A, to its forward, paragraph 5.2, 5.6, 5.8, and the summary action plan. You'll be unsurprised to learn I'm unable to answer questions directly about the strategy itself, but can refer them back to the procurement manager if you have them, or communicate if you are satisfied with it in its current form.
Thank you very much, Alex. So the changes to the strategy are on page 205 onwards on our papers. And as Alex said, the changes are on 3.7 of our papers. Are we happy, members? And I think that's taken into account the general idea and focus of the meeting we had in December. So I'd like to thank Lisa for taking that seriously and incorporating those changes into the strategy. So we're in agenda item 9, page 219 of our papers, which is the forward work programme and identify possible issues for scrutiny. I think our work programme is quite busy. Have members had a chance to look at the forward plan from up to the 30th of April 2025, page 219 of our papers onwards? Is there anything else, anything that stands out that we'd like to do maybe a task and finish group review on, or any ideas that we'd like? I know our work programme is fixed, but there is room for obviously task and finish groups to meet for 3 or 4 hours, once or twice, and then come up with a recommendation to Cabinet. I'll just give members a quick minute or two just to look at this work programme, because it has been a long agenda tonight. Can I ask a question? Oh, no, I'm not going to actually. Okay, have we all anything come up? Yeah, Councillor.
Yeah, so on here we've got today's meeting, then we've got 6th of March. Have we got anything beyond that, or is that what we're deciding what else we want to go forward with? Because work programme goes 6th of March, because I know previously we'd spoken about looking at enforcement officers and KPIs and the whole package of that at some point, and also about carbon zero and how that's going to look across the board, maybe in response with the climate change panel or with Councillor Richards.
The community enforcement officers were very recently discussed at the Operations Review Committee. I believe that's probably a more appropriate venue for that. But we will begin the process of drafting the 25-26 programme for this committee imminently, really. So we will discuss including both of those.
Yeah. That's right, and thank you for drawing that to our attention. Actually, you're right, this is only to the end of the municipal year. It's quite important that we're now thinking about work we'd like to do, especially now we will then be over halfway into the partnerships administration, and so there's things that we should now be thinking about getting our teeth into as policy review, looking backwards, but also maybe looking forward. Some of the ideas we hear from cabinets going that they like to take into action, or ideas we hear from other councils, or ideas we have ourselves. For good scrutiny, task and finish, or ideas would be really welcomed, and the peer review does mention it. We are mentioned, I didn't want to bring it up tonight, but it does mention about overview and scrutiny. We have some very strong functions and powers. We aren't utilising them for various reasons, and it's not always a negative, certainly not. But I do think we now our feet are firmly under the table. With the next municipal year and then going forward the one afterwards, we should be thinking about things that we would like to bring forward as policy review. And if we have ideas, we are now fulfilling the timetable for next year. I've seen 2 hands rise, so I'll take Councillor Georgia, then Councillor Allen. Thank you.
I just wanted to check as well on the 6th of March. Hertsmere is down as attending, and will he be available by then? I think he might have left, so we need to obviously confirm who will be. It'll
be the acting head of planning, whoever's, because there's going to be an interim, as you know, there will be a gap between having a head of planning, between Hertsmere leaving and a head of planning, so whoever it will be. They might, I don't think Councillor Oakley has a reason to ask to put it forward, because it's her portfolio, she should be able to present, so we don't know who'll be in her attendance, but certainly Scott or somebody from development management.
Yeah, just
but
sort of bring that up in case we needed to.
I was actually going to thank Ross, because it's the last meeting I have, but I realise he's going to be at planning on Thursday, but I will write to him on behalf of scrutiny as well, just to thank him for all the meetings he comes to.
3 ideas, not very fully formed, just putting them out there. 1, staff retention, something we could look at. Secondly, we've discussed EFS quite a lot. I know there is an asset management panel. That's maybe that's their gig. But I think there is scope, and we've discussed before, for this committee having a look at EFS and asset management in general. And also, at the last policy review, we talked about a kind of members' star chamber to kind of look at big PR events, which we discussed, and hasn't really gone anywhere. And I wonder whether we could come back to that in a bit more detail.
Excellent. And thank you for remembering. That's absolutely right. Staff retention, maybe that's for us, maybe it's for personnel to be discussing. Maybe personnel, we can ask for a report on it and think if we should then be bringing, but hopefully there's a new change in the senior management after the peer review that maybe they'll be listening to ideas, because I do know personnel may have made recommendations in the past and they've not been taken forwards. So maybe it may be worth our while seeing just the reports of the last personnel. There was a review into this, wasn't there, I think? Or do you think we should do a separate one? Hilary?
Sorry, I know that there is a report going to the next personnel committee about the hybrid working policy and various different bits about pay and grading reviews and all of that sort of thing. So, that's scheduled for February.
So I think maybe that could come to us in the first meeting of the municipal year, just to look at and cover that. And then Councillor Allen, if we think then it would have already been put in place, and we could look into that. I think that's really important. So EFS is actually coming up in our next meeting. It was postponed from December because of from November's meeting because of the managing director's workload. So we are discussing it at the next meeting, and I do believe, from what the managing director has told me, there will be work coming from that. And I think we should be, so that's a really good point, and we'll make a key point of trying maybe to find some work from that because it is vital. And also the Star Chamber, I'd like to do that, because communications is very important, and especially we've got an item on the agenda, for example, tomorrow that might be adopted by the council on skips, and I think communication, which I'll be talking about, is vital in that. Communication is vital in all the things that we do bring forward, and there are gaps, as we mentioned last meeting, so can we put that forward as well to think about ways of getting member involvement, because 1 or 2, 3 members to look over it's absolutely great. Yeah, and members, once again, please maybe spend the time now, we have free time or thinking about certain ideas that we can go forward rather than just doing our portfolio updates, which are very important, but I think we may need to be looking outside the box in scrutiny, but we will discuss the peer review maybe at our next meeting. Thank you very much. So now we go forward to agenda item 10, AOB. There is no urgent business. Agenda item 11, future meeting is going to be on the 6th of March at 7 p.m. And just one thing, when we look at the schedule of meetings tomorrow, it does say policy review 7:30. It isn't, it's 7 p.m. Just so you're aware. There's been a little typo. Is there anything else we need to talk? No. Meeting is closed at 9:38. Members, thank you very much. Your contributions were fantastic tonight.